edited American English version. I was standing in what was left of the barn at dawn, staring at the splintered boards and the coarse black hair stuck in the rotting wood. The horses were gone. The farm was gone. My entire way of life, everything I had watched my family build over generations was gone. And I had ignored every warning sign until it was too late. This is the story of how I lost nearly everything. My family ran a small horse ranch out in the countryside, right next to a stretch of dense forest. We'd been there for 3 generations. My grandfather built the original stable. My father expanded it, and I was supposed to pass it down to my kids someday. We always had a dozen or more high-quality horses on the property. Some were for breeding, others for dressage and jumping competitions. These weren't wild Mustangs. We're talking about animals worth anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000 each. We even leased out some of our studs to nearby farms. The ranch was everything to us: our income, our legacy, our future. My wife and I had 2 kids, ages 6 and 9, when all this happened. They grew up around the horses, riding before they could even read. Behind our home stretched miles of untouched forest, no roads, no hiking trails, nothing but trees and whatever lived among them. Looking back now, the warning signs had been there about 3 years before everything fell apart. I just didn't want to see them for what they were. It started with broken fence posts along the tree line. I'd go out to check the pasture and find thick wooden stakes snapped clean in half. Not rotted, not termite-eaten, just broken, like someone had swung a baseball bat at them. The breaks were sharp and clean, showing sudden, tremendous force. I blamed the weather, old age, anything I could think of. Then came the footprints. Huge tracks pressed into the mud near the creek behind our property. Bigger than any boot I'd ever seen. I measured one once about 18.5 inches long and 7 inches wide at the ball of the foot. I convinced myself they were bear prints, though they didn't look like any bear tracks I'd ever seen. Bears leave claw marks. These had none. 5 distinct toes, spaced apart human-like, but impossibly large. Around that time, the horses started acting strange at night. They'd whinny and stomp in their stalls for no reason. When I went out to check, they were all huddled against the far wall, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. The whole stable smelled like fear. I'd shine my flashlight around, but never saw a thing. But the horses knew. Animals have instincts we've long forgotten. They could sense something out there that I couldn't. My main breeding stallion, a big, powerful horse, started losing weight. The vet couldn't find anything wrong. He was eating fine, everything seemed normal, yet he wasted away as if something was draining him. Stress, the vet finally said. Something was stressing him out. At night, I'd hear him kick the stall wall. Bang, 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 for hours. By morning, the wood was dented from his hooves. My wife started complaining she felt watched whenever she hung laundry near the woods. She'd go out in broad daylight, clothespins in her mouth, and suddenly feel that tingling on the back of her neck, the feeling you get when someone's staring right at you. She'd turn around and see nothing but trees. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It followed her all around the yard until she finally started doing laundry at the laundromat in town. She said it was just easier, but I knew better. One morning, I found a deer carcass hanging from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground. It had been partially eaten. I've hunted my whole life. I know how animals feed, but this wasn't that. The deer had been placed there, balanced carefully on the branch, as if something intended to come back for it later. The torn flesh looked as though it had been ripped apart by hand. I could even see what looked like finger marks pressed into the meat. Not bite marks, finger marks, like something had grabbed and yanked. There was also a stench near the edge of our property, not constant, but it would drift in when the wind came from the woods. It smelled of musk and rot, like wet dog, mixed with decaying vegetation and something else, something I couldn't identify. If you got too close, it would make your eyes water and your stomach churn. I told myself it was just a dead animal decomposing out there somewhere, but the smell would fade, then return days later, strongest right around dusk. If it was a carcass, it should have either gotten worse or disappeared. But this smell kept coming back. About 6 months before I lost everything, things escalated in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. The horses refused to graze in the back pasture. These were animals that had spent their whole lives on that land, and suddenly they wouldn't go near the tree line. I opened the gate, but they stayed clustered around the barn. When I tried to lead them out, they'd stomp and pull back, frozen in place. A 900-pound animal doesn't move if it doesn't want to. One morning, I looked out the kitchen window and saw 3 of my horses standing by the pasture fence, all facing the forest. They stood there for over an hour, completely still, not grazing, not moving, just staring into the trees. Their ears were pricked forward, their bodies tense. I went out to look but saw nothing. Still, the horses wouldn't move. They kept watch until I finally led them back inside by hand. That's when I found the coarse black hair tangled in the fence posts. It was long, thick, greasy, too long for a bear. I know what bear fur looks like. This was different, rougher, more like human hair, but not quite. It felt strange when I touched it, both oily and stiff. The smell clung to my hands for hours. Then one morning, I walked outside and saw my daughter's swing set bent out of shape. The metal poles were twisted, as if someone had tried to rip the whole thing out of the ground. Those poles were thick steel, set deep in concrete. I couldn't have bent them if I'd tried. Something incredibly strong had grabbed that swing set and nearly tore it in half. The patio chair had been dragged across the ground. My daughter burst into tears when she saw it. There were deep gouges in the barn door, long, splintered marks that ran straight across the wood. When I measured them, the highest scratch was 8 feet off the ground. I tried to think of any animal that could claw wood that high while standing on the ground. I couldn't. The marks were parallel, 4 of them, side by side like fingers. My wife heard heavy footsteps circling the house around 2 in the morning. She shook me awake, whispering that something was walking out there. We lay still in bed, listening. The footsteps were slow, too slow for a running animal, too heavy for a person. Each step made the floorboards tremble just slightly. We heard it circle the house twice before the sound faded toward the forest. I installed motion-activated lights all around the property. They would flick on randomly at night. I'd look out the window and see nothing, or sometimes just a glimpse of something huge moving out of the light's edge, something walking upright. Sometimes the lights triggered one after another, as if whatever it was deliberately testing our perimeter, probing our defenses. My son told me about something he saw from the school bus. He was 9 at the time. The bus dropped him off at the end of our long driveway around 3:30 every afternoon. One early spring day, he came running up the path, breathless, eyes wide. He said there was a man standing in the trees, watching him walk up the drive, a tall, shaggy man. My boy stopped and stared at it, and it stared right back. Then it turned and walked away into the forest calmly, like it owned the place. He said it walked on 2 legs but was hunched over, with long arms that swung down near its knees. I told him it was probably a hunter in camouflage. He insisted it wasn't. He knew what hunters looked like. This wasn't one of them. This one wasn't wearing clothes. It was covered in dark brown hair from head to toe. After dinner, I drove down to the end of the driveway to look around. I found footprints pressed into the soft dirt near a tree. They weren't human. I measured them about 14 inches long. I told my son I'd start picking him up from school instead of letting him ride the bus. He seemed relieved. A week later, my 6-year-old daughter came to me before bedtime. She was small for her age and afraid of the dark. She told me the hairy man had looked in her window. She said she'd woken up to use the bathroom and saw a face pressed against the glass, flat nose, dark eyes, hair covering everything but the eyes, nose, and mouth. She screamed, and my wife ran in, but when they reached the window, nothing was there. The next morning, I went outside to check. Her window was 8 feet off the ground. There was a clear impression in the dirt beneath it. Something had been standing there. The mark was deep, as if whatever made it was incredibly heavy. There were also handprints on the glass. I measured them, 9 inches wide across the palm. The smudged fingers extended another 6 inches up the window. I didn't let the kids sleep in that room anymore. They started sharing a room on the opposite side of the house, facing the woods. I nailed the curtains shut on the old bedroom and only went in there when absolutely necessary. I began seeing movement in the forest. Not animals, something larger, something that moved with purpose. One afternoon while working in the yard, I caught sight of a dark shape moving between the trees. When I looked directly at it, it vanished, but the feeling of being watched lingered. One evening, I was fixing the fence again, replacing the same broken boards. The sun was sinking low, maybe an hour of light left. Then I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned and saw it standing about 50 feet away, partly hidden behind a large oak. It was watching me work, just standing there, one massive hand gripping the tree trunk. We locked eyes. Its eyes were almost black, but alive, aware. It knew I saw it, and it didn't care. I slowly reached for the hammer I'd set down, not to throw it, just to have something in my hand. The creature tilted its head, curious, like it was studying me. Then it stepped away from the tree and walked deeper into the forest. No hurry, no fear, just gone. It walked upright, slightly hunched, its long arms swinging at its sides. Within seconds, it had vanished completely into the brush. I dropped my work on the fence and went straight into the house. I was shaking. That thing had been close, so close I could have hit it with a rock if I'd tried. And it hadn't been afraid of me at all. A few nights later, my wife and I were watching TV in the living room. The kids were asleep upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, we heard noises coming from the back porch. A scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the wood. Then a deep thud, as if something large had dropped down onto the porch. I grabbed my rifle from the closet and told my wife to lock the doors and call the sheriff if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. I stepped out the front door and moved along the side of the house, rifle raised. The back porch was empty, but our trash can had been dragged from the porch into the yard. It was flipped over, lid ripped off, garbage scattered everywhere. In the middle of the mess were 2 enormous footprints, perfectly outlined in coffee grounds and leftovers. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pile of feces on the porch steps. It had left it there on purpose. A massive heap, far too large for any normal animal. It was marking territory. Sending a message, "This is my space. You're here because I allow it." I cleaned it up before my wife could see and told her a raccoon must have gotten into the trash. She believed me, or pretended to. I think by then she already knew something was very wrong but didn't want to admit it, because admitting it would make it real. By late autumn, around dusk one evening, I was herding the horses into the barn for the night. Darkness was falling fast, and I always tried to get them in before it set completely. The temperature was dropping, I could see my breath. Then I heard a sound coming from the woods. Not a howl, not a growl. Something in between deep and resonant, like it came from somewhere deep inside a massive chest. The sound made the hair on my arms stand up. It twisted my gut. It was wrong. The kind of sound that triggers something ancient and primal in your brain. One of my mares screamed. Not a whinny, a scream. The kind a horse makes when it thinks it's about to die, high-pitched, desperate, full of raw terror. I ran toward the far paddock and found her cornered, trembling so hard her whole body quaked. Foam dripped from her mouth, and her eyes were rolled white. She was staring at something beyond the fence. I followed her gaze and saw it. Something huge was moving in the dark between the trees. It stood upright, at least 8 feet tall, covered in matted black hair that seemed to swallow the last traces of light. It swayed side to side, not unsteady, but deliberate, rhythmic, like it was thinking, calculating. I froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. Things like this don't exist. I'd grown up in these woods. I'd hunted here since I was 12. I knew every animal that lived in this forest. This wasn't one of them. Then the creature raised an arm and pointed, first at the horse, then at me. The gesture was unmistakable, intentional. It was telling me that the horse was that it could take whatever it wanted. Then it stepped back into the forest. 1 second it was there, clear as day. The next it was gone, like it had melted into the night. But I know what I saw. And more importantly, the horse knew it too. She'd seen it. The mayor had to bring in the vet to treat her for trauma. She wouldn't eat or drink for 3 days. The vet couldn't find anything physically wrong, but she'd lost weight fast, her coat dull and lifeless. Fear had nearly killed her. The vet asked me what could have scared her that badly. I told him I didn't know. I didn't have the words to describe what I'd seen. A few days later, all the horses started acting strange. During the day, they'd cluster together in the farthest corner of the pasture, as far from the woods as possible. At night, they'd kick the walls. Winnie refused to lie down. The entire barn became a chorus of restless, anxious noise. At 2 in the morning, I went out there, and found all 12 horses standing rigid, ears forward, staring at the same spot on the back wall, staring at something I couldn't see. The next morning, I called the county rangers. I couldn't tell them what I'd really seen. They'd think I was insane. Hell, I thought I was insane. So I told them I suspected a bear had been causing trouble on the property. That afternoon, 2 rangers came out. They walked around the barn, inspected the scratches, collected hair samples from the fence posts, took photos. They agreed it looked like bear sign, but I could tell they were puzzled. One of them measured the prints and frowned. He said the stride didn't line up with any known bear pattern. The hair samples weren't quite right either. The texture and color didn't match the black bears common to our region. But what else could it be? They set up trail cameras in the woods and placed a few traps. For the next 2 weeks, hunters combed through the forest behind my property looking for a den. They found nothing. No dens, no scat, no signs of territory, no fresh kills, nothing. Eventually, the rangers decided the bear must have moved on and took down the cameras. They told me to call if there was any more trouble. I thanked them and tried to believe they were right. Winter came, quiet and still. No incidents, no signs, nothing. The horses finally settled down. My wife stopped sleeping with the baseball bat beside the bed. The kids started playing outside again without me having to watch them every second. I used the quiet time to fix the fences and reinforce the barn. I replaced broken boards and added extra latches to every door. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself it was all just a strange coincidence, a wandering bear following a food source. Maybe someone had passed through the property and kept walking. I wanted to believe it was over. I needed to believe it was over. Then spring came, and the snow melted. That's when it started again. I found one of the horse blankets torn to shreds out in the back pasture, as if something had grabbed it and ripped it apart with its bare hands. Not chewed, ripped. That night, something slammed into the barn so hard that the walls shook. I felt the impact from inside the house. I grabbed my shotgun and ran outside. My prize-breeding stallion was down in his stall, eyes rolled white in terror, his whole body soaked in sweat. Outside, I found deep impressions in the mud near the fence. Not hoofprints, but handprints, 5 fingers, each about a foot long. The fence boards had been cracked, as if something had reached through trying to grab the horse. I stood there in the dark, with the rifle in my hands, staring at those prints, and finally admitted what this was. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't anything I'd ever learned about in school. This was something entirely different. 3 nights later, the horses started screaming again. All of them, at once, in the middle of the night. I grabbed my rifle and ran for the barn, wearing nothing but my underwear and boots. My wife shouted from behind, asking what was happening. I told her to lock the doors and keep the kids inside. The side door of the barn had been ripped completely off its hinges. It hung there, twisted, barely held by a single bent screw, swaying in the cold wind. These were thick, heavy wooden doors with iron hardware, built to withstand a horse's kick from the inside. Whatever did this had unimaginable strength. The wood around the hinges splintered outward, showing the force came from outside. One of my smallest mares was gone. Her stall door was still latched tight, but she was gone. I'd raised that horse since birth. She was 3 years old, gentle as a lamb, just starting her dressage training. She was worth $20,000, but more than that, she was family. I followed the trail of dirt and blood to the tree line. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the flashlight. The blood trail was thin, a drop here, a smear there. Not much, but enough to tell me she was hurt. About 200 yards in, I found her. Her neck was broken. She was lying on her side, legs twisted unnaturally. She'd been dragged partway through the brush. I could see the grooves in the dirt where her body had been pulled. Under the beam of my flashlight, I could see bruises on her neck, and within them, clear finger marks. Not claw marks, fingers. Dark, hand-shaped bruises. Eich Finger distinct. Something with hands had grabbed her throat and snapped her neck. The prints were enormous. I held my own hand against one of the bruises, and my palm looked like a child's in comparison. There were other marks, 2 scratches along her flank where she'd been grabbed, a bite on her shoulder, but it didn't match any animal bite I'd ever seen. The teeth pattern was all wrong. It looked too human. The canines were pronounced, yes, but the overall spacing was closer to human than to any predator. No wolf, no bear. I called the sheriff's department. They came out, looked around, took a few photos, and filed it as a wildlife-related incident. One deputy suggested it might have been a mountain lion. Mountain lions hadn't been seen around here in decades, but I didn't argue. What was I supposed to say? That Bigfoot killed my horse? They'd have locked me up. Each horse represented years of work and investment. I couldn't afford to lose another, but I had no idea how to stop something like this. How do you protect against something that isn't supposed to exist? The other horses knew what had happened. The next morning, they refused to leave the barn. I had to drag them out one by one, and they fought me every step of the way. They didn't want to go near the pastures. They didn't want to go outside at all. Their fear spread to them, to me. Even I didn't want to go out there anymore. After that night, I started seeing them more clearly. Always at dusk or dawn, I'd stand at the edge of the woods and see them watching the house. Sometimes just one, sometimes two, one larger than the other. They'd stand there for 10, maybe 15 minutes, completely still, then melt back into the trees. If I blinked, they were gone. My kids saw one from their bedroom window. They asked me why the big hairy man was standing next to the tree. I told them it was just a trick of the light. I told them to stay away from the windows after dark. My wife was terrified. She wanted to leave. She wanted to pack up and take the kids to her mother's place in town. But what would we have left? The ranch was everything. Our home, our income, our future. We couldn't just walk away. I started keeping the kids home after 4 p.m., drove them to school myself every morning. Every night I sat by the window with my rifle, watching the tree line. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I lived on fear, coffee, and the fragile hope that I could keep my family safe. Whatever was out there had started testing us, pushing boundaries, seeing what it could get away with. My tool shed was the first to go. The metal door had been bent backward, tools scattered everywhere, but nothing stolen. It wasn't theft. It was a message. I can get in whenever I want. Then the chicken coop was destroyed, completely leveled overnight. All 6 chickens dead. Not eaten, just killed and left there. The coop itself was smashed to pieces. Deep dents appeared on the side of my pickup truck. 4 long scratches running the length of the driver's side, as if something had dragged its fingers across the paint. My wife's garden was trampled flat, every plant uprooted and tossed aside. She'd spent weeks building that garden. She cried when she saw it. It felt deliberate, like whatever was out there was toying with us, playing with us. I installed my own trail cameras, better ones than the rangers had used, but they kept getting broken or knocked over. And the few that survived, the creature was always just outside the frame. I managed to capture one photograph, a massive dark shape standing upright among the trees, its eyes glowing back at the camera's flash. When I zoomed in, the details blurred away, but you could still make out the silhouette, tall, vertical, covered in hair. It was late May. I was taking out the trash after dinner. The sun was just dipping below the horizon, painting the sky a soft orange pink. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt terrifying. I heard heavy breathing behind the shed, deep, raspy breaths, like something huge had just run a long way, or like something enormous was simply breathing. I rounded the corner, and there it was, 15 feet away, close enough to see everything. It was bigger than I'd ever imagined. At least 8 feet tall, maybe 9. 600 pounds of muscle and matted hair. The face was almost human, but not quite. A flat, broad nose with wide nostrils. A heavy brow casting deep shadows over the eyes. And those eyes, they were too knowing, too intelligent. Not animal eyes. There was awareness there. Understanding. Intention. It was covered head to toe in dark brown-black hair, tangled and filthy. The hair on its head and shoulders was longer, on its face and palms shorter. Its hands were huge, twice the size of mine. Easy, thick fingers ending in black nails that looked hard as stone. Then the smell hit me. It was like being punched by it. A stench so strong it was almost physical. Death, sweat, something ancient and wild. It was unbearable. Made my eyes water and my stomach turn. I'd never smelled anything like it. The closest I can describe it: take the stench of a wet dog, mix it with rotting meat, add pure animal musk, and multiply it by 10. We locked eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The rifle was slung over my shoulder, but my hands wouldn't respond. I was frozen, completely paralyzed. Some deep, primal part of my brain recognized what I was seeing. A top predator, something that could kill me in seconds if it wanted to. Then it raised one arm and pounded its chest. Boom, boom, boom. The sound echoed across the property. I felt it in my ribs, in my bones. Then it roared, a low, earth-shaking bellow that sounded like it came from the ground itself. It was so loud I couldn't hear anything else for a few seconds. Just a high ringing in my ears. Finally, my body came back to life. I lifted the rifle. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely aim. Instead of retreating, the creature stepped toward me. Its foot hit the ground with a thud that made the dirt tremble. I fired into the air, one warning shot. The crack split the silence, birds exploding from the trees in panic. It flinched, but didn't run. It just slowly backed into the darkness, eyes locked on mine the whole time. Each step was deliberate, controlled. It wasn't afraid. It was choosing to leave. There's a difference. Then it was gone, melted into the forest like smoke. I stood there, heart pounding so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. My legs wouldn't stop shaking. I had come face to face with something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it wasn't afraid of me, not even a little. If anything, I was terrified of it. When I got back inside, my wife asked if I'd seen anything. I told her it was just a deer. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what to do next. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair by the window, rifle across my lap, watching the tree line. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made me flinch. Around 3 a.m., I saw motion at the edge of the property. A massive, upright shape standing just inside the trees. It was watching the house, watching me, and I watched it. We stayed like that until dawn, two beings staring each other down across 300 feet of open ground. Neither of us moved. Neither of us backed down. When the sun finally broke through the trees, it turned and walked back into the forest. Only then did I let out the breath I'd been holding. The next day, I bought electric fencing supplies. 3 days of work, running lines around the entire perimeter of the barn. I reinforced every stall door with steel braces. Moved the horses into the barn closest to the house, where I could see them from the kitchen window. Then I installed industrial-grade motion lights. Floodlights so bright they could light up the whole yard like a football field. I slept in the barn for a week straight, rifle loaded and ready. My wife and kids stayed with her mother in town. I told her they'd come home once I sorted out the security issue. By that weekend, I was exhausted, running on maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. I couldn't keep it up much longer. I was just one man trying to fight something I didn't understand. Something I couldn't fight. One night, I must have dozed off for just a minute. When I woke, the electric fence, 40 feet of it was down. Posts ripped out of the ground and snapped like matchsticks. Whatever this thing was, it was stronger than anything I could build. My mother-in-law needed her house back. She's old, and having my wife and the kids stay with her for over a week had worn her out. So the family came home. I didn't tell my wife about the fence being destroyed. I'd already rebuilt it. I didn't tell her that I'd seen the creature up close either. She was scared enough already. For 4 days, everything was quiet. Almost too quiet. I started to believe maybe it was finally over. Maybe my precautions had worked. By the 5th night, around 3 in the morning, I realized just how wrong I was. The following week, I tried to keep life normal, but something fundamental had changed. The fear had sunk into our bones. My daughter refused to sleep alone. Every night she'd crawl into bed with us, trembling and crying, saying she could hear them outside. Sometimes I could, too. Heavy footsteps, low rumbling sounds, almost like they were communicating. They were still out there, still watching. My son stopped playing outside completely. He'd stand by the window, staring at the forest for hours. One afternoon, I found him in the yard swinging a baseball bat. He said he was getting ready in case they came back. He was 9. No 9-year-old should have to think like that. The horses were in bad shape. Some stopped eating. Others grew restless and jumpy. One mare paced the stall so much she wore a track in the dirt. Another began biting herself bloody scratches on her legs. The stress was killing them as surely as any predator could. I installed more lights, reinforced what was left of the barn, set up more cameras, but nothing made me feel safer. Nothing could stop something that strong, that intelligent, that determined. My wife barely spoke to me anymore. And when she did, it was about leaving, about taking the kids somewhere safe, about how we were risking everything by staying. She was right, but leaving meant abandoning everything we'd built, everything my family had worked for over 3 generations. One night, I found her packing clothes in the kids' room. She didn't ask me anymore. She just said we were leaving with or without me. 2 nights before we were set to sell the place, they came back. This time, they didn't go for the barn. They went for the fence. I woke to the sound of wood snapping. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside, and saw them, 3 of them, tearing the fence apart, ripping posts from the ground, hurling them aside like they weighed nothing. I fired a warning shot into the air. They stopped and turned toward me. One of them, the biggest, grabbed a fence post, easily 80 pounds, and threw it. It sailed through the air and slammed into the side of my truck, crushing the door in. A warning. A display of power. Then they turned and walked away. They could have charged me. They could have come for the house. But they didn't. They were sending a message. You can't stop us. You can't fight us. Leave, or we'll escalate. That was the message. The next morning, I found one of my horses dead in its stall. The vet said it was natural causes a heart attack. But I knew better. Stress killed her. Pure, relentless fear. She'd literally been scared to death. That mare had been pregnant. She miscarried 3 months early. I lost 2 lives that day. The foal alone was worth $25,000. That was my kids' college fund gone overnight. The noise woke me from a dead sleep. Horses screaming, wood splintering, metal twisting, all of it together in one horrific symphony of destruction. The whole house shook. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside, still in my underwear and boots. My wife came running after me, shouting, asking what was happening. I told her to get back inside, take the kids into the bathroom, lock the door, and call 911. She ran back in. The barn was being torn apart from the outside. Not just one wall, several. There was more than one of them. The creature I'd seen before was ripping boards off the south wall, reaching through the gaps to grab at the horses inside. On the north side, I saw another, smaller, but still massive, doing the same thing. They were working together. The horses inside were in full-blown panic. I heard them kicking, screaming, crashing against their stalls, desperate to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The monsters had trapped them. I raised my rifle and fired at the larger one, hit it in the shoulder. I saw the impact, saw it flinch. It roared and dropped to one knee, then charged straight at me with a speed no creature that size should have. It closed the distance in seconds. I dove aside, it barreled past so close I could feel its coarse, damp fur brush my arm. The hair was rough, heavy with dew. I rolled to my feet and fired again as it turned. Missed. The gun jammed. I tried to clear it, but the bolt stuck. The creature stopped, towering over me from 10 feet away. We locked eyes, those black, intelligent eyes. And in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just animal cunning, not predator instinct, something more. It knew exactly what it was doing. It understood. Then I heard my son screaming from the house. "Daddy, Daddy!" The creature heard it too. It looked past me toward the house, toward where my family was hiding. The smaller one stopped tearing at the barn and turned its head toward the house as well. They were thinking, deciding. I lifted the jammed rifle like a club. I didn't care that it couldn't fire. I'd hit them with it if I had to. I'd die before I let them reach my family. The larger one looked back at me. We stared at each other for what felt like forever. Then it made a sound, a deep, rumbling vibration that seemed to come from its chest. The smaller one answered with a similar growl. like they were communicating. Then they turned and walked back toward the woods. Not running, just walking, calm and steady. The larger one stopped at the tree line and looked back at me one last time. Then they disappeared. Right then, I understood. That thing could have killed me anytime it wanted. It could have gone after my family anytime it wanted. But it didn't. It was giving me a choice. Keep fighting and risk everything. Or leave. The message couldn't have been clearer. This was their territory. We were the intruders. And they'd run out of patience. When the sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, they found the barn completely destroyed. 2 sides caved in, boards torn loose, support beams cracked, the roof sagging dangerously. Inside, 2 horses were injured. One had deep gashes along her flank, likely from colliding with sharp debris while trying to escape. Another had kicked through a stall door and broken its leg. The deputies took photos, measured the damage, asked questions I couldn't answer. What did I see? How many animals? Which way did they go? I told them the truth. Mostly. I said several large animals attacked the barn and fled into the woods. I didn't tell them the part about the creatures walking on 2 legs, or the hands. They logged it as a bear attack. Maybe 2 bears, they said. Unusual behavior, they noted. Yeah, you could say that. They said they'd report it to Fish and Wildlife. The vet arrived just before dawn. The horse with the broken leg had to be put down. She was worth $18,000. The other mare, the one with the gash, needed stitches and antibiotics. Another $1,000 in vet bills. My insurance didn't cover any of it. The policy specifically excluded attacks by unidentified wildlife and acts of nature. This was considered both. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun came up. My wife was crying. The kids were terrified. They'd seen everything from the upstairs window. My son asked if the hairy men were going to come back. I told him no. I told him we were safe now. I lied, and he knew it. My wife looked at me and said what we were both thinking. We can't stay here. She was right. I tried to protect the horses, the ranch, our way of life, but I couldn't protect my family. Not from this. I couldn't prove what was out there. The authorities thought it was bears. I couldn't kill them. I'd shot one, and it barely slowed down. And even if I somehow killed one, there were others. That night had proven they worked together, coordinated, planned. My children had to come first. Nothing else mattered anymore. The day I listed the horses for sale, I walked down to the far pasture one last time. I needed to see where it had all started. Where I'd first seen that thing watching my mare. There were fresh footprints in the damp grass, still wet with morning dew, leading from the forest to about 50 feet from where I stood. It had been there that morning watching me. Maybe it had watched me making calls to buyers. Maybe watched me taking down the for sale signs I'd posted around the property. I looked up and saw it, standing at the tree line. The big one, the alpha, if that's what you want to call it. We stared at each other across the field. Then it did something I'll never forget. It nodded once, slow, deliberate, as if it understood, as if it knew what I was doing. Then it turned and walked back into the forest. That was the last time I ever saw it, but I know it's still out there. Watching, always watching. This is its home, not mine. I'd only borrowed space on its land. And now, it wanted it back. Within 2 weeks, I'd sold every horse. Buyers came from 3 counties over. They could sense my desperation. They knew I needed to sell fast. They offered lowball prices for every one of them. The breeding stallion I'd bought for $35,000 sold for $16,000. The show mare that had won 3 competitions went for $12,000. She was worth at least $25,000. The younger ones, the ones with promise, sold for next to nothing. The buyers would watch them see how skittish they were, how nervous, and use that to haggle me down even further. I stood there watching them load each horse onto trailers and drive away. Each one was a memory. The breeding stallion I'd fought for at auction 5 years earlier, outbidding everyone in the room. The mare I'd helped deliver when her mother died in labor. The 3-year-old colt I'd trained myself. A gift from a man who trusted me completely. Gone. My daughter cried when they took her favorite horse. A gentle old gelding who'd taught both kids how to ride. He was 20 years old, not worth much money, but priceless to her. The buyer promised to take good care of him. I wanted to believe him. My son didn't cry. He just stood there watching, face hard and still, too serious for a 9-year-old. He'd learned too much about loss, about fear, about things that shouldn't exist, but do. In total, I got about $140,000 for 12 horses. Animals worth close to 300. I lost over 150 grand, and that was just the horses. That didn't include the barn repairs, the vet bills, the destroyed equipment, the broken fencing. I listed the ranch for sale that same week, $30,000 below market value just to move it fast. The real estate agent asked why I was in such a hurry. I told her we'd found a place closer to town, better schools for the kids. She didn't press. A week later, a young couple came to see the property. First-time homebuyers, fresh out of college, full of hope and dreams. They wanted to start an organic farm. No animals, just crops. They walked the property with bright eyes, talking excitedly about where they'd put the greenhouse, where the vegetable beds would go. The husband asked if we'd ever had any trouble with wildlife. He hesitated. My wife squeezed my hand, a silent warning. I told them the wildlife out here could be aggressive. Be careful at night, keep your doors locked. They laughed, said they'd lived rural before, they'd manage. That afternoon, they made an offer lower than asking, but close enough. We accepted immediately. The week before the move was the longest week of my life. Every night, I waited for them to come back, to finish what they'd started, to punish us for not leaving sooner. But they didn't come. The land was silent, almost too silent. The woods felt empty, like something had withdrawn, or maybe was just watching, waiting. I found tracks again, fresh prints in the mud by the barn, leading from the forest to the property line and back again. A single set, the biggest ones. It had come to check, to make sure we were really leaving. I wondered if it was satisfied, if this was what it had wanted all along. The horses were gone. The people were leaving. The land was returning to the wild. On moving day, the movers loaded our furniture, boxes, our whole life into the truck. The kids got into my wife's car. She was taking them to her mother's while I handled the last details. Before I left, I walked down to the edge of the property one final time. I looked into the forest, the dark spaces between the trees, the shadows deep enough to hide something enormous. And I said aloud, "It's yours now. Leave them alone." I didn't know if it heard me, didn't know if it could understand, or if it even cared. But I needed to say it. I needed to believe leaving was enough, that the new owners would be safe, because they weren't a threat. No horses to hunt, no territory to challenge. I climbed into the truck and drove down that long dirt road one last time. In the rearview mirror, I saw something move at the tree line, a massive upright shape, watching me go. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just kept driving. Our new house is in a small neighborhood about 40 miles away. Tiny yard. Neighbors close enough that we can hear their TVs through the walls. Close enough that if you reached out your window, you could touch the next house. The kids adjusted better than I expected. They've made friends at their new school. My daughter joined the soccer team. My son started taking karate. He says he wants to learn how to protect himself. I don't argue. If it makes him feel safe, it's worth it. They don't talk much about the old ranch anymore. Sometimes my daughter asks about her horse, how it's doing, where it might be. I tell her it's probably happy. Plenty of grass, no stress. I hope that's true. My wife found a job in town, a receptionist at a dental clinic. She seems happy, lighter. The fear is gone from her eyes. She sleeps through the night now. No more waking at every sound. No more reaching for the baseball bat by the bed. I'm doing construction work these days. Framing houses, installing drywall, roofing. It's good work, hard work. Keeps me busy. The pay's steady, though not like the ranch. We're getting by. But sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m., listening for sounds that aren't there anymore. The crack of wood, the heavy footsteps, that low guttural rumble. And in those moments, I'm back there again, standing in the dark, rifle in hand, staring into the eyes of something I can't fight and can't understand. Sometimes, I drive past the old ranch, just to look. I don't stop. I just slow down as I pass. The new owners seem happy. Their garden is thriving. Lush rows of vegetables, a small greenhouse they built themselves. Now they even have chickens. A little coop with a dozen birds. No horses. Nothing large. Nothing worth hunting. And I can't help but wonder, maybe that's why they've been left alone. Maybe those things only cared about the horses. The prey. The challenge. Maybe. Or maybe they decided that my family wasn't a threat. Not worth the effort to scare off. Or maybe those creatures are still there, still watching. Just waiting. Patient. I still have nightmares. Standing in the empty barn at dawn, looking at the shattered boards, the strands of black hair tangled in the splinters, the damp tracks leading back into the trees, knowing something had been there. Something real. Something terrifying. Something that shouldn't exist. I know I made the right choice. My family is safe. We're alive. We're together. My kids are happy. My wife doesn't live in fear anymore. But part of me still feels like a coward. Like I should have fought harder, stood my ground, defended what was mine. But there are battles you can't win. Sometimes survival means knowing when to walk away. When you're outmatched. When the cost of staying is greater than the cost of leaving. My children are safe and healthy. They don't wake up screaming anymore. My daughter doesn't cry about the hairy man outside her window. My son doesn't patrol the halls with a baseball bat. That's what matters. Even if it cost me everything I'd built, even if I lost 3 generations of family history, even if I lost $150,000, even if I lost who I was, a horseman, a farmer, a man who belonged to that land, they're safe. That has to be enough. Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I pull up that forest on satellite maps. I zoom in on the untouched patches of wilderness, the dark, unbroken green that stretches for miles. And I think about what might still be out there, what's still living in those shadows. I wonder how many others have seen what I've seen. How many have had to abandon their home because of something that shouldn't exist. How many kept quiet because nobody would believe them, because saying it out loud makes you sound insane. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. My wife knows. My kids know. The horses knew long before any of us. There are things in those woods that science hasn't named yet. Things smart enough to avoid cameras and hide, strong enough to snap a horse's neck with one hand, and organized enough to coordinate, to plan, to send messages. They're real. They're out there. And they don't want us on their land. If you're reading this, and you've ever experienced something like I did, if you've ever seen something in the woods you can't explain, something watching you from the darkness, making you feel like prey, I believe you. I understand what it's like to see the impossible and have no one to tell, to carry that knowledge alone. And if you're thinking about buying property near the woods, near untouched wilderness, I have one piece of advice. Pay attention. Watch for broken fences, strange tracks, changes in animal behavior, that feeling of being watched. Don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it away. Don't convince yourself it's nothing, because by the time you realize what's really out there, it might already be too late. I got out. My family is safe, but I lost everything else in the process. And somewhere in those forests, miles of dark timber behind the land that used to be mine, something is still there, still watching, still waiting, and it always will be, because this is its home, not ours. We were just guests who stayed too long, and when we refused to leave, it made sure we did. I hope the new owners never see what I saw. I hope their chickens and gardens aren't enough to draw its attention. I hope they can live there happily, never knowing what watches from the trees. But sometimes I worry. Sometimes I think about warning them, telling them everything. But what could I say? How could I explain something like this to someone who's never seen it? I can't. They'd think I was crazy, just like I would have thought before I saw it myself. So I don't say anything. Sometimes I just drive past, make sure the lights are still on, that everything looks normal, that the woods are still just woods. And I hope that's enough.